Hey, so we've got a nice healthy breakfast here. I'll walk you through this in just a second. But this video, I wanted to sit down and take you through 5 steps that I'd follow if I wanted to lose a nice, steady, sustainable 4 to 8 pounds per month in the case that I was starting from scratch with weight loss. These are the 4 things I'd personally focus on if I had anywhere more than about 15 pounds to lose. It's not as though these rules, principles are not going to be useful to anyone at a more advanced stage. Let's say you've got the last couple of pounds to lose. But really, I'm thinking, what would I do if I was more of a beginner, intermediate stage again? I didn't know all that much about nutrition. I didn't have extensive exercise selection knowledge. I didn't know what to do when I hit a plateau. Maybe I'd lost some weight in the past, but I wasn't able to keep it going. I was confused by all the conflicting info out there. If I was in those shoes, these are the 4 steps that I would take. All right, let's have a quick look at the brekkie then before we get into number one. We've got some oats here cooked in soy milk. Got some wild blueberries. These are so tart. They're really nutrient rich, but they're so tart. We've got some raspberries, bit of sliced apple here. You ain't going to make this out, I think, on my shoddy webcam camera here. We're getting the proper camera set up, so you won't have to deal with this much longer. I've got some walnuts for the amigas, drizzle of maple syrup. Anything else? Oh, the oats, of course, are cooked in a little bit of cinnamon, as always, to bring it to life. And this is really a really simple breakfast meal that I'm eating on repeat. It's quite diverse in terms of nutrients. I know there'll be some nerd in the comments that's like, what about the protein? What about the protein, mate? Honestly, guys, I get north of 120 grams of protein a day. If one of my meals, like breakfast, for example, is slightly less in protein one day, I don't freak out about it. I know it'll all work out. Some of my meals have less carbohydrate. Some of them have less or more fat. Some of them have less or more protein. I don't personally get so neurotic, and I don't see the value of getting so neurotic with all of this nutrition stuff that I think I need to feed myself some kind of IV drip of the perfect amount of carbohydrates, protein, calories, fat, fiber, selenium, magnesium, vitamin C, vitamin D in each meal that I eat. And each meal must be 237 minutes apart. That's no life for me. This has to be practical. So if it's a lower protein breakfast, so be it. I know it'll all work out. Anyway, rant over. Let's get into number one. The first thing I'd do to lose a realistic and sustainable 4 to 8 pounds per month, I'd make such a big play for fiber. Fiber would fill up so much of my plates and my bowls, like you've just seen, because the benefits from a more sort of wide nutrition and health perspective are endless. But let me just give you a few from a weight loss perspective. Number one, fiber helps you stay fuller for longer, which can minimize the risk of overeating. Number two, fiber helps fight inflammation, which is increasingly being linked to obesity. And three, this one is more by association, but lots of the higher fiber foods tend to have a very low caloric density. Nuts and seeds are an obvious exception to this, but generally speaking, if a food is high in fiber, it will tend to have very few calories comparatively versus foods that are lower in fiber. Again, you'll find exceptions to this, but this is a general rule. So this offers, by focusing on the fiber, this offers some element of kind of automatic calorie control, let's say. It doesn't mean that you're not going to overeat. It doesn't guarantee it, because you can still force feed fiber-rich foods down your gullet, but they do have this self-limiting element to them. And this does, versus lots of processed foods or animal products where maybe the fiber is void, this does really help in terms of, making sure that you're not ramping up the calories every single day constantly. What I would say on this, because when I propose this fiber issue, some people are very, and understandably so, quite cautious, because they notice that when they add more fiber-rich foods like beans, lentils, cruciferous veggies, for example, to their diet, there can be some difficulty in terms of digestion there. So what I would say on this is kind of feel it out, to be a bit sort of casual about it. Feel it out. Don't increase your fiber too quickly if your gut bacteria isn't used to having all that much fiber right now. You might want to start steady with things like the beans and the cruciferous veggies and things like that, especially if you've observed that they can cause a bit of gas, flatulence, some digestive discomfort, etc., in the past. A pro tip, by the way, if you do struggle with beans, it might be worth, which some new vegans and plant-based dieters will tell me, it might be worth trying tofu, because it can be much easier on digestion for a lot of folks. Second thing I'd do, I'd actually focus on low-intense exercise only. And fitness classes are big right now. The spinning classes in the gym, they're always full at my local gym. Things like CrossFit, Hyrox is getting really, really big. These more intense forms of movement where you can burn like 400 to maybe 750 calories in an hour with these really intense sweat-filled sessions. But if you're a beginner, if you're new to this, there's a really high risk of injury with some of this stuff. Respectfully, it's probably above your current pay grade in terms of fitness level. So you might be biting off more than you can chew anyway. It might not be that appropriate for you anyway. Not to mention the crazy appetite spikes, which can be associated with more high intensity exercise, which can be very tricky to manage. Not impossible, but quite tricky to manage when you're new-ish to weight loss. Should I eat more? And what should I eat to get those extra calories in for the fueling? Do I need more carbohydrate now? But when might that cross the line and become overeating? How's that all going to interact with the scale? Like, this is tricky stuff. The instability of changing appetite around the workout, maybe on rest days it isn't quite so bad. Like, this is tricky stuff for sort of intermediates and beginners with weight loss to deal with. So that's why actually personally, maybe quite controversially, I'd actually focus on very gentle, low intensity exercise as a newbie. Believe it or not, guys, I would probably start with like a 7,000 to 8,000 step target. And I know you guys see me kind of do my strength workouts in the gym a couple of times per week. You've heard me talk about tennis and martial arts in the past, not presently doing those as I've relocated. But so easy for me to just walk all the time. And even though I love those other forms of exercise now, if I was starting from scratch and thinking, right, what is the lowest barrier to entry here? What's the low-hanging fruit? What can I do that I know I won't need that much motivation for? Well, living in a moderately sized European capital like I do, I know I'll do lots of walking. So thank you very much. Let me just burn a few calories from walking, not have the crazy appetite spikes, feel that it's very practical and therefore doesn't require that much motivation for my life. It's practical for my life because I need to do it and I happen to do it anyway. Brilliant. Low risk of injury. I think I might have said that already. But yeah, the benefits to that are endless without the crazy appetite spikes, without the risk of burnout, without having to pay somebody to go and do their fitness class or something like that, or pay in kind of sweat equity, which might be more appropriate as I advance with my fitness level naturally in time. So that's why I have this whole slow go philosophy that I do. Starting steady, building up in time can be a great way. And yes, guys, you can be in a calorie deficit and lose weight just with walking. It's possible. You can actually be in a calorie deficit and lose weight just sat on your settee every bloody day. It's probably advisable to do some exercise too from a more wider health and weight loss, well-being perspective. But you catch my drift here. You can lose weight at any exercise level as long as you're not gorging your brains out with high-calorie foods. So that's the approach I take. That's the one that would work for me. The third thing I'd focus on to lose my 4 to 8 pounds per month, I would understand that if I ever hit a weight loss plateau, if the scale stopped moving, not just for a day or two, but for a week and a half or so, I would understand that this was a calorie issue. And it wasn't about carbohydrates. It wasn't because I was doing, as I mentioned in the previous point, walking only, and the solution is CrossFit. I would understand that the bottom line is a calorie issue. Now, there are many different solutions to this. It might be that CrossFit a couple of times a week is the answer to help me better get in a calorie deficit again and start losing weight. But the actual problem is that I am consuming versus using too many calories. Does that make sense? And this is so unprofound, wildly, but it is something that I actually feel very, very obligated to say because there is so much messaging at the moment in the online space, especially, which is if you're not losing weight or if you're gaining weight, it's the carbs. It's because you're not doing keto. It's because you're not carnivore. Carnivore will solve everything. And then on the adverse end of the spectrum, you've got maybe some of the raw vegans that are like, oh, you need to do raw vegan food and that's the best way to lose weight. Some people saying that's the only way to lose weight, which is an outrageous claim. And I just want to suggest to you that from my experience now, I mean, I don't flex this enough. 530 people, guys, through Slim and Sustain now. For me, the common denominator is calories. Like what works for weight loss across the nutrition spectrum is when you're in a calorie deficit, quite simply. The key, though, is to make, I believe, for sustainable weight loss, which is what we're going for here, is to make that calorie deficit quite slight and quite moderate. When you do the extreme aggressive stuff, it can be incredibly short lived because it's wildly unsustainable. But I would understand here if at any point, I was focusing on the high fiber foods, I was doing my exercise, I was doing step number four, which I'm going to talk you through in a second, and I wasn't losing any weight, I would understand, okay, I'm probably consuming too many calories. And that would create some kind of auditing. It doesn't mean that I would count my calories every day. This is a different video because if I was a beginner, I wouldn't actually count and track every calorie, every macro that I consumed. I wouldn't, again, quite controversially. But if I did hit that plateau, I would then look at my diet and I would go, okay, where are lots of my calories coming from? And it's not as though I might cut that thing out altogether, but I would just be a little bit more sensible about it. For example, one mistake I see with lots of vegans and plant-based dieters, to give you something very workable on this, is nut butters, right? And they do have lots of good nutrients, but let's be honest, most people are eating lots of nut butter because it's bloody delicious, it's downright delicious. Well, it's also extremely calorific. Something like a very level, right? This is not what most people do, but a very level tablespoon of maybe 15, 16 grams, half an ounce of peanut butter. You're looking at 100 calories or so, give or take on the brand. That's a lot for a level tablespoon. And that's not what most people are heaping that damn thing up, right? And they're doing like 150, 180 calories on their version of a tablespoon. So this is something that you do this a couple of times a day. That can be the difference between you being in a calorie deficit or not. So that would force that introspection and that audit on any high calorie foods that I was eating. And it's not as though I'd cut things out because, again, you don't want to be too aggressive. Like I said, that's not my philosophy. That's not worked for me. It's kind of this slow and steady wins the race mentality. So if I was eating lots of nut butter, I might not take it all out of my diet, but simply by reducing it, I might be able to shave 100, 200 calories off my daily diet and get that scale moving again, get out of that plateau. And lastly on our list here, but by no means least, because I firmly believe that there's a huge number of you watching this right now for whom this particular point is the difference maker. It is the reason why you're not currently losing weight. You're actually doing everything else I would possibly suggest right. You're going through the checklist and you're like, yes, yes, yes. This is the elephant in the room that you're not tackling. It's the snacking and the grazing, guys. Right? So many people are spending hundreds of calories throughout the day on a couple of cashew nuts, bit of nut butter on toast, soy lattes from Starbucks, maybe a juice or a kombucha here and there. These things might not sound egregious in isolation. In fact, I've listed many sort of healthy, clean eating, nutrient rich snacks, fruit, for example, amazing. But if you are doing these things and you're still eating very, very regular, for you at least, sized meals, and then you're adding all these additional calories through snacking. And some of these foods that you're snacking on, we're not talking about watermelon here necessarily, it has an incredibly low calorie density, but we might be talking about things like dried fruit and nuts and trail mix and Lara bars, naked bars for my friends in the UK, etc., etc. This stuff is pretty calorically dense, albeit healthy. So you have to be really, really careful with this, I would suggest. Now, I don't want to make a hard and fast rule about this, that snacking is bad, grazing is the enemy. That's not my view. Let's go back to my previous point. All the spiel I gave about the bottom line is this calorie deficit thing. If you ate a couple of small meals per day, and then hypothetically you were quite a big grazer and a snacker throughout the day, you might well, depending on your food choices, but you might well finish the day still in a calorie deficit and therefore lose weight. However, if you're doing regular Joe-sized meals and you're doing all of that snacking and grazing, you're just adding all of these additional calories to your diet. And I don't want to say you're wasting calories because you should spend calories how you best like, of course. But it might be a waste of calories if you're trying to lose some weight right now and if your main meals are really, really big. And I personally am someone that places a lot of importance on just eating a few but really filling meals per day. I love to sit down for a big dinner and it's filling and it's satisfying and I don't need to think about food for the rest of the night. That's personally how I like doing things. So right now I'm not a massive grazer and snacker anyway, but certainly if I was in a weight loss phase again, if I was heavier than I am now, and I knew that something in my diet had to give in terms of calories, it would be far easier for me to cut back on any snacking than it would to chip away at my meals that really I feel hit the spot. Yeah, so again, especially this is one for folks that are snacking and grazing, particularly on high calorie foods, because you can eat lots of water rich, fresh fruit like berries and citrus fruits, and some apples, some pears, and things like that. And it's not actually going to add your again, depends on how much, but it's not actually going to add your calorie totals for the day up all that much as long as you're being relatively sensible about it. But you start adding in that more calorically dense stuff, you start doing medjool dates and smoothies, and like I say, you start grabbing oat cappuccinos, lattes especially, here and there, and your calories are going folks. Those are the 4 steps that I would personally focus on if I was starting from scratch with weight loss and I wanted to lose a healthy, realistic, and sustainable 4 to 8 pounds per month. Avoid all of the crazy extreme diet hacks and other shortcuts and quick fixes, and do something that actually felt nice, controlled, healthy. And again, this word for me again is a bit of a buzzword for me, of sustainability for me. So I'm getting back to what's left of my demolished breakfast here. Absolutely delicious. Then we're going to hit the gym. We've got a good old leg workout in. Everyone hates leg day, me included. But for you, you might just be starting out, as I said earlier, with the very low intensity stuff. That's certainly good enough to start. If you want more help implementing this game plan, you want to eliminate all the guesswork for yourself, have me tell you exactly how much to eat, precisely what to do for exercise with my whole slow go philosophy, click the link down below to learn more about joining the Slim and Sustain coaching program. Chat soon.